Welcome back to Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Today we have a new Connected Farmer here, and he is Lyle Benjamin. How are you?
I'm doing well, Louis. It's good to visit with you this morning.
I would like that you tell me how did you start farming? Where do you farm? What agriculture represents for your life?
Our family left Missouri in the late 1890s, homesteaded out in Idaho for the next 15 or so years, and then came over to Montana in 1911. At that time, we homesteaded here, and I'm the fifth generation along with my brothers in this area. We raise primarily wheat in this region. On my own farm here, we had wheat, malt barley that went down into Mexico, and canola that went into Canada. Most of our wheat was exported to the Pacific Rim, so Japan and Taiwan, Korea. We've also in recent years seen lentils, peas, and garbanzo beans come into this area and be successful. And that's just been in the last 10 or so years. So it's been a really interesting progression. It's very dry country. Our typical rainfall is 9 to 12 inches in this area, and there's no irrigation. So we depend entirely upon those timely rains for our yield. It's tough country, and we consider it to be high desert. So it's interesting that we can successfully farm here. But for the last 100 or so years, there's been a number of families that have made a living out here.
Yeah, what are the big challenges of farming in Montana?
So aside from the weather that I've talked about, out here distance is probably one of our bigger things. Last year my average hauling distance for my crops was 76 miles from the farm to whatever terminal market. And I've had some runs that were nearly 150 miles one way to deliver crops from the farm to the elevator. So it's big country. Each farm has a lot of acres, and so there's a lot of distance between neighbors. Right now I'm kind of blessed. My nearest neighbor is only a mile away. My previous farm, my nearest neighbor was 6 miles away. So the distance is a huge factor out here, and people hardly comprehend that. We get our groceries to a little town that's 17 miles away. They have the basics, our major farm parts and things like that are well over 60 miles away. So it's every time you get in a pickup here, you're going to be in for 45 minutes or an hour to get somewhere.
And how do you ship your crops from there?
Excellent question. We depend on a really vast rail network out here. Burlington Northern Santa Fe, or BNSF, services this area. It services about 17 different shuttle elevators. Each of those are running 110 car trains out to the coast of Portland. It's really efficient service, and they take good care of us out here. That handles all of the wheat production. The barley production and the pulse production tends to go out in single car shipments. So there's a handful of smaller little spur line operators that will take those shipments. Usually those cars move out in 5 or 6 car at a time lots. But to get from the farm to the rail network, just about everybody out here has a 40-foot semi-trailer. We're starting to see A trains or semi-trailers and pups come in. And again, it ties back to that thing of distance and quantities. It's how you overcome that challenge. You don't make any money on the grain you're hauling in the front trailer. Your profit comes in that pup that's in the back when you're hauling grain. So and I don't expect that to go away. I expect distances to increase, and I expect these challenges to grow in the same way.
Is the shipping cost always a major concern there?
It's always something we think about. When the railroad starts talking about increasing their tariff rate, in this case that refers to the price to ship from here to the coast. It's always a conversation we have with them. But ultimately, there's a cost to having that efficient service, and we accept that it's going to cost us something to ship to the coast. Frankly, this country this northern plains country would not thrive in the way that it does without that high efficiency rail network. And so we just accept that as a cost of doing business. But it's gotten to the point where you don't even really think twice about adding 40 or 50 cents a bushel to the cost of your product to get it from your farm to your terminal destination. You know, if you think about it in those terms, in today's market, that's you're adding 10 or 12% to the cost of your product just to get it to your rail destination.
Yes, and how this season has been for you in terms of weather and prices?
We've kind of seen the price soften a little bit. The midwinter around Christmas time, there was a good pricing opportunity for wheat, and we've seen that soften a little bit. Going into the spring now, we're just at the end of planting season here. We were very dry, and this last day we had a nice rain that's kind of perked everybody back up again, and people are feeling a little bit better about their prospects for this spring. But at least in this northern part of Montana, I would say probably the 30-mile corridor along the Canadian border, it has been very dry the last 2 years, and the signs are that it will be very dry again this year, even with this weekend rain.
Yeah, and you have a past also as a farm leader. I would like to tell us a little bit about your activity at the farm association there, and about your involvement, your political views.
Sure. I have been an officer for Montana Grain Growers Association for the past 4.5 years. I'm currently serving as the immediate past president, so I'm about 6 months away from going off that board. It's been a terrific experience. Our association handles policy at the local, state, and works well with our national affiliate, the National Association of Wheat Growers, which comprises about 22 wheat producing states in across the U.S. Within that role, I've been to our state capital, Helena, a number of times. I've been back to DC to visit about farm policy, both with agencies and with our elected representatives. It's been an enormous amount of fun. It's been a challenge. I've learned a terrific amount about interacting with people and carrying the farm message, and talking about the challenges that we have. And certainly I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the opportunities that we have. You know, it's, for as much as we talk about how tough things are, the reality is we've been here in this area for over 100 years, and there is success. There is new equipment. There is, there is pricing opportunities, and it does rain, and it's, things are good. So I talk about those things too, and it's a lot of fun. Our association is, this is going to sound funny, but it's non-political. We don't take a left or right approach. We take the approach that we are here to represent grain farmer interests very narrowly, and we look for the solution that fits our farmers, and that solution might be found on either side of the political aisle, and often is. So we are careful not to take a partisan view of these things. We just advocate specifically for Montana wheat and barley growers, and the issues that we have within that. So as you prioritize those, obviously we've got domestic policy. We're talking about how USDA programs work in Montana, and if they do, or how they can be improved. We talk about the rail piece of this. Obviously transportation is a big concern of ours, because that's the only way our domestic products get to their markets. 80% of Montana's grain is exported, so it has to get there on a train, and then ultimately by ship. So transportation is a big thing we talk about, and certainly in today's environment, as a national thing, we talk about the interaction with herbicides and pesticides with our environment and with our farms, and how critical some of these tools are, and two of the efficiency and safety of our operations, and we defend those, and make sure that we have those tools. Because 2 weeks ago we had a 56-mile-an-hour windstorm come through this area. We started to see soil blow even in some of our minimum till fields. Without these chemical tools that we have to maintain minimum tillage, that dust storm would have been 1930s again. As it
Mhm.
was narrowly confined to some damaged fields. So it's this country doesn't remember what it was like when it was completely under tillage, and we advocate for the tools that allow us to continue to do these responsible minimum tillage practices.
And what are the hardest parts that lawmakers don't understand? What are the hardest parts for them to understand the farmer's view? And what have you achieved as in this past position?
uh, our Montana representatives understand the problems pretty well. They come from here, they live here. When they're not back in DC developing policy, so it's not a problem talking to our own representatives. But as you go back into DC and start talking about this rural reality of what is often kind of jibingly referred to as flyover country, the realities are so totally different between the left coast and right coast, high density urban populations. When I start talking about driving to town for 45 minutes to get groceries and passing 3 farms while I do that, that's a reality that it doesn't compute when you're talking to a House of Representative member whose district is in Tampa, Florida, has 140,000 members in 3 square miles. And I come from a county that is 52 miles long at 63 miles across, and we've got 5,000 people in that amount of space. So those kind of realities. When you start talking about those, first you have to establish a little bit of credibility, because people can hardly believe that reality. We had a congressman here a few years ago who was famous for saying it's a long ways between light bulbs out here in Montana, in kind of his rural way. And that's a reality. It's you can count on 2 hands the number of lights that I can see from my farm at night across the entire horizon.
Yes.
So those challenges relate then to the types of solutions that are going to work well here are far different than they would be in upstate New York or the I-states, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa. Our rural reality is far different than the Midwest, certainly.
And how does the trade war has impacted you?
That is a huge deal to us. As I said, Montana exports 80% of its product, whether it's wheat, canola, or malt barley. China was a number 6 market of ours for our grain products. Japan is typically a number 1 buyer of our wheat. Mexico buys half of our malt barley. Canada buys probably almost 100% of our canola. So when we start looking about these cross-border transactions that either are completely halted or are severely throttled back, that's our market, and it is critical that we get those markets reopened and moving at the same efficiency that they have been. Recently with coronavirus, all that topic has pretty well, the oxygen left the room to talk about tariffs and trade wars, but the reality has not changed, and that is that we need to continue to have excellent relationships with each of these countries that buy our products. America is always going to be a net exporter. We have a vast river network that makes efficient river transportation. We've got this excellent heartland that is high productive ground and low population density. That means we are going to be exporting those products that we raise out here. So we need those markets. They're critical to us, and we need national policy that is not detrimental to the smooth transactions across those markets. So it's the trade war is something we've very much paid attention to, and Montana alone, we were looking at some numbers here a while back, and at that time we felt like Montana had lost $150 million directly to its producers because of the impacts of the trade war.
Yeah, and what about the insurance? Farmers in the recent years have to use insurance in your county and your region.
The federal crop insurance program is critical to us here. As I've mentioned, it's a high desert. Our rainfall is unpredictable, and in some years we might get the rainfall, but it comes at the wrong time. Um, and crop insurance is a critical safety net that helps us weather those storms. We were looking at some numbers here a while back that were, if we didn't have crop insurance, if we didn't have a number of these government programs that are some of the conservation security programs and things like that, we would probably need to be in that low $20 per bushel range in order for us to have the capital to weather these storms. Compare that to our current market price of about $5. Does that make the price of a loaf of bread go up 4 times in the grocery store? I'm here to think that it does, because we have all those follow-on effects that come from the processors between the farm and the table or the glass. So it's important for people to realize that the crop insurance program helps create rural stability, and it also helps keep their food prices low on their table or in their glass.
And what do you expect for this harvest? Do you expect good results?
I wouldn't be a farmer if I wasn't optimistic and say that this is going to be a good year. As I look at our moisture reality, it's probably going to be an average year. But we've had the term, this is next year country, for probably as long as this place has been settled. So optimism is just a natural part of what we do, and I'm absolutely looking forward to a good crop year this year.
Yeah, and I would like to hear a little bit your comments about ranching in Montana. I'm not sure if you are very familiar with that, but how is it to ranch in Montana?
I'm a farmer rather than a rancher, so my comments will be based on that reality. That said, my farm is right on this shift that there is between farm country and ranch country. Everything east of me is ranch country, and I have very good relationships with my neighbors. Ranching has the similar reality. We're a short grass prairie here. The grass depends entirely on timely rainfall. It's high dense, or it's high energy grass. You look out across it and you'll see grass that's 4 to 6 inches tall, and you think, how do those crazy guys raise anything on that? And yet the energy density that is in that short grass is very high. And we don't raise a large number of cattle on our acres. The typical stocking rate might be 1 cow per 20 acres out here. In some places, 1 cow per 30 acres. So we have the cattle are spread out over vast distances, over large acreages. You talk ranch size here. A typical ranch is going to be, it would start at 5,000 acres, probably be 10 to 20,000 acres, and even that 20,000 acre operation might only be running 800 or 1,000 head of cattle. So it's, you look at those numbers and that reality. It makes for some big places. It makes for some very sparsely populated areas, but it makes for great neighbors, because people work together. This time of year, people are just about done branding, or just about done calving. They're starting to get into the branding season, where we mark the cattle to provide proof of ownership and give the animals a couple of different therapeutic injections. Branding time is awesome, because it's 5 or 6 ranchers will come together to work the cattle together, and it's kind of a cultural touchstone each year. You catch up on the goings on of the winter, and you kind of visit about what things look like for the summer, and it's a lot of fun. That being said, as we've looked at what the impacts to the U.S. Packing plant process flow has been with coronavirus, there's some headwinds for the ranchers, and this is going to get tough before it gets better. You can't take out that critical link in your chain of processing that gets your animal on the hoof through that process change to the table. You can't remove that critical link and not have some severe disruptions in the supply chain. So, as we see the industry process that over the next 6 months, I would say, you're going to see some ripples, and hopefully we can weather those reasonably well. But we're also going to see some significant changes, I think, in the supply chain because of this. We're seeing a lot more focus on local processed meat. We're seeing a lot more focus on direct sale, farm to consumer, ranch to consumer type arrangements. Are those the full solution? I don't think so, but they certainly might be a large minority solution, and that's going to have some significant effects on the larger American meat industry, I think.
Yeah, I also read some stories about Montana as a new frontier for some crops like corn or soybeans. What do you think of that?
I think that's possible. As you look at Montana, picture a postcard. It's long east to west. It's relatively short north to south. We're only 400 miles from top to bottom, but we're about 650 miles east to west. As you come west, the climate changes dramatically up against the Rockies. It becomes increasingly hard to raise corn and soybeans because of our growing degree days. I'm at the 49th parallel for latitude here, and our growing season is short. So we're seeing some soybeans coming here. We've had some success with dryland corn, but I don't see that probably being a thing for another 10 years. We have seen peas, lentils, and garbanzo beans coming in the last 10 years and have been quite successful with those. Those markets have developed. There's a number of buyers. The logistic chain is getting built out to our Pacific Rim partners. And I would say that part of our industry is becoming, it's getting close to being mature. But corn and soybeans, I don't see it for a while. The corn and soy is starting to come into eastern Montana a little bit, but it's going to take some time to make that last 300-mile jump over into our Golden Triangle area here, I think.
Lyle Benjamin, a connected farmer from Montana. Thank you.
Thank you.